What's up, you guys? Welcome back to Glass Houses. We'll be starting this 3-part series of the seminar, Why Didn't You Tell Me This Years Ago? 101 Ideas for Killifish and the Fish Room by Mark Hlavaty.
Okay, when Jim, it's okay, okay, there's one thing that like every time I've come here a few times to the show, and this is kind of the best show in the country, including the convention. So thank you guys for doing this. It is special, and what makes it special is that.
Okay, could we get the volume up just a little bit? Our people are really
A little
old,
closer, how's that?
and they have a very difficult time hearing.
Okay, one other thing.
Dave Frankel. He wants to do sign language. So, anyway, yeah. I mean, I can't hear because I'm half deaf, so I have to take Dave's word.
We had a minor technical issue in that my newer computer didn't want to talk to the older connection thing. The two cords did not talk to each other at all. So when this idea started of actually speaking to a group, I told Jimmy, I go, hey, I do not talk in front of a bunch of people. I might answer a question in 30 seconds or so, but doing a speech is not what I do at all. And he goes, well, just do a whole bunch of 30-second kind of things. And I go, okay, so we talked about that a little bit, and I sent him an email saying, okay, here's kind of what I'm thinking. And I'm thinking of doing this as a walkthrough of the fish room, because I noticed every time you go over to somebody's house and look at their fish, you learn something or you remember something that you used to do that worked pretty good, right? And so that's where the name of the thing came from. It says, why didn't you tell me about this years ago? It would have saved me hours and hours and hours. And I apologize because I thought I'd be able to give everybody a handout of kind of like a quick remembrance kind of thing, because if you're like me, you'll see something in a slide, and by the time the next slide comes through, you'll forget about that one. And by the time you get home, it's hopeless. So my email's around, so if you have a question or kind of remember something, just send me a note. And I know from, I found killifish when I was in high school. I went down to our local fish store one day, which is about a mile away from my house, and saw this thing sitting in one of the tanks, and I go, what in the world is that? Because it didn't look like anything else. I go, if I could ever get one of those, it'd be amazing. And they were like, I mean, they must have been like $9 or something at that point. Which was all the money in the world. And luckily, a couple years later, I was able to get them, and I happened to be subscribing to Tropical Fish Hobbyist at the time. And back in the back pages, there was a thing to join the American Killifish Association, which I did, and I saw a little bit later a ad for killifish and a book. And in the fish and eggs listings, there was a guy named Fred Stewart that happened to live in Livonia. I'm from Detroit. Fred lived in Livonia, which was the other side of the world from me, like a whole 18 miles away. But I was able to borrow the car and go over to Fred's house. And Fred was an engineer at Ford, and had he must have had 20 tanks down his basement. And everything, he's an engineer, so everything's like perfect. Yep. And so Fred gave me some fish, and we eventually went going, and then a year or two later, I found out, hey, there's this group forming called the Michigan Killifish Group. And they sucked me in, and I've been part of that group forever. And one of the things I saw was this book came out somewhere along that point, and I saw that fish, and I go, man, if I could ever get them, it would be incredible. And eventually, I forget when I actually bought them, but you see pictures of fish like that or other things, and you go, man, those would be cool. What do I have to do to get them? How in the world do I do this? And so I eventually had a few fish, but I went through and was able to have, I had 3 5-gallon tanks, right? And a 20-gallon tank that had a community tank. And then I went for I expanded out to 6 tanks and had that for about 20 years. And then I bought a new house, and I went down the basement in the furnace room, and there were shelves all down one wall. I go, I can put my tanks right there. So eventually the fish bred. So and you needed a place to put other stuff, right? Junk and fry and stuff. So another little shelf appeared. And then the fish bred, and so the shelves got bigger, went around there. Then a few more fish came along and went around the corner into the next room, and kind of kept growing to expand and expand. And then people would come over and stuff. And I kept threatening, this is the sign I should have at the top of the stairs going down. That, everybody does something a little bit different. And what I do, I figure, hey, you have fish, you have water, they have food, they should be doing okay. And sometimes we as hobbyists kind of make things a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. And there should be, I don't think there's anything special about killifish that are different from any other fish you keep. Because when I first got them, one of the guys told me, hey, they don't need heaters, they work in a small tank, they'll eat about anything, and they will breed right in the tank, and you'll have little fish coming. So, well, maybe that will work. And what my plan, or what I'm trying to do with the fish, is I thought when I saw those first fish, those first gardener eyes, I thought it would be really cool to have a whole tank of those. And that's been my idea the whole time I'm doing it. If I can have a tank with 6 or 8 or 10 or whatever, that's the plan through the way I've developed things. So the tanks you saw on that last version of things they're planted tanks, so I can see the fish, and the tanks are long way out, so I can see all the fish. And you notice I have mops in the tanks, and I pick eggs, and that gives me 12 or 15 eggs to keep things going for the next group. So I happened to move last summer and went from a house to a townhouse. And as I was looking around for a place to live, I don't think of myself as a picky person, but I need a couple things. I need a basement for the fish, and I need a 2-car garage. A kitchen would be nice, maybe a bedroom. But, so I looked for about 1.5 years to find something suitable, and kind of gave up. So we said, okay, maybe I can rent somewhere. And the first day, my real estate person hey, go look at this. Nice townhouse, 2-car garage, basement. So I go down the basement, and it's a townhouse. Looks a nice square basement. Over in one corner's a furnace room. It's half-finished basement. Nice kind of carpet like this on the floor. The other corner is a full bath shower. Right next to that is a little kitchenette kind of thing with a sink, counter, refrigerator, microwave, cable down there. I'm going, I don't ever have to come up at all. Right? So it has developed into, try to do a quick, okay, well that didn't work. But when I moved, I also couldn't move those little cinder block tanks, the cinder block shelves and things, so I wound up moving to the wire rack system, and with a series of different kinds of LED lights and everything, because I like the plants in the tank. And actually those last two ones were supposed to be, there were little videos that did not click on when I tried to hit them. But now there's 44 10s, 45s, and 25 2.5s down there for fry. So it keeps a bunch of different fish. And so when I come to like shows and things, I may come with a lot of fish, but it's 2 of these, 2 of these, 2 of these, 2 of these, rather than trying to produce a million of things. And I think if, and I've tried it before, but if you ever want to do a lot of a species, you go to the sphagnum moth method like John and Gary Greenwood and people do. That really can produce a large number of things. And I tried to like sequence these a little bit, but I'd be talking about one thing and then something else would come up and everything. So some of this comes together in pieces, if you will. And if you have a question about anything, ask like right now rather than later, because if you're like me, you'll forget the question and whatever. I feed, obviously, baby brine shrimp, and since my room has no heater or whatever, and the guys tell me that at 80 degrees, baby brine shrimp, they'll hatch out kind of perfectly in 18 hours or so. So mine, we get them from Brine Shrimp Direct mostly. They take longer than that. But I was filling my little pop container with water in the sink a few months ago, and I'm going, I wonder what happens if I use hot water, right? So I filled it with hot water, and it's like literally smoking. And I go, I wonder how hot that really is. And it turns out it wasn't as hot as I thought. It was only about, at that point, it'll keep getting hotter and hotter, but it was like only about 100 degrees. And I thought, well, it gets hot out there in Utah, so maybe that'll work. And it does. All of a sudden, I'm getting virtually almost a full hatch 24 hours later in the morning when I do it. And then I'll take that hatch of brine shrimp and put it in a bowl and feed throughout the day from that. And it's still alive like the next day for the next day. And you ever wonder, when you pour yourself a cup of coffee and it cools off pretty quickly? Well, that container of water, I measured a couple days in a row because I couldn't believe it, that it was 92 degrees when I poured it in. An hour later, it was 85 degrees. An hour after that, it was still 78 degrees. And so it actually does get a couple hour jump on hatching out. So in the morning, yes?
Your container looks like it's opaque. I've heard that brine shrimp need light to hatch. I also use the warm weather. Apparently that's not true about the light.
I don't think they need light to hatch. Yeah, because that is, that's a 2-liter pop Coke bottle inside of that pitcher, And it's inside the pitcher because, hey, it stands up nice and easy.
If you move off the side, sometimes just step in front
Yeah.
of the screen.
Oh, let me move this. Yeah, so, yeah, they, I guess the heat and obviously super aeration in there keeps them going, even though the tray that they sit in throughout the day, there's no aeration in that, and they don't seem to all die out through the course of another 24 hours. So my general routine or habit now, Mr. Franco has told me that routines and habits are somewhat the same. I'll get up in the morning and have breakfast, and then go down about 6:30 when the lights come on in the fish room and give them a dash of dry food. And the dry food that seems to work best for me is from Brine Shrimp Direct. It's Killifish 1 and 2, just depending on the size of the fish. And I was feeding flake food to the adult fish, but the adults seem to like the Killifish 2 just as well, and that way it's just one thing, and it's actually much cleaner in that there's less uneaten food that just falls down and nobody hits. And then the little container in the middle is from
Aquarium Co-op.
Yeah, Aquarium Co-op, and I'm not pushing their food or anything, but I saw that in the local store, and I go, well, that's a slick container for feeding the food. And once you get the hang of it, you can sprinkle in like, a half a dozen grains of it, because that's like the Killifish 1 size stuff for, 3-week, 4-week-old stuff, or you can give it a good spurts for a whole tank of fish. And so I used up their food, and now it's Killifish 1 in there. But it's the container thing that's the best. And then the other container is trout chow. That's not for the fish, that's for the grindleworms. And there's one of the older guys in Detroit, everybody knows Carl Doring. Carl always said, hey, if you want eggs, you have to feed worms. And grindleworms, the guys in Detroit have figured out the foam method of culturing them in a shoebox type container with a saturated piece of foam, and then just put the trout chow on top of that, add the grindleworms, and a piece of plastic on top of that, and the worms will collect on the plastic, and you just rinse them off and feed them with an eyedropper.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
Do you cover your container?
Yes.
To keep the moisture?
Yes. Yes, it keeps the moisture in, and for the first year or two I was doing it, I had it way too wet. And the key to it, all of a sudden, you go over, there's a fellow named Jürgen Kasprick in Detroit that's kind of my big brother in the aquarium hobby. When I first started into the aquarium club, I didn't realize there were aquarium clubs. And I went to one, and this Jürgen guy was there, and he was very knowledgeable about things. He was one of the older guys that was, kind of the guy with the answers. And Jürgen's an engineer, and very precise about things, Like for doing brine shrimp, I have the thing of salt, and I go, that looks good. Jürgen weighs the salt every day, because the difference in humidity makes a difference in the amount of salt. I'm in the close enough club. But yes, it's like if there's water standing on the bottom of the container, then you have too much water. And the only hassle in doing these things, for me, was every spring, about the middle of April, I would find a really nice batch of grindle worms along with a really nice hatch of some fruit flies or whatever they are that appear, no matter what I do, and they kind of take over in the space of a week. And so you pitch that out and start over and go from there. And then Keith Cook told me there's a way to get rid of those. And it's this stuff called Natural, which is a commercial product used in the florist industry and food production and everything to control mites on plants. So he said, hey, you just spray it on and it'll take care of them. I go, cool. So I sprayed it on and it took care of them. And then a couple weeks later, they come back.
Before anyone starts looking for it, it's only available in 5-gallon buckets for $600 now.
Really?
The retail version has been discontinued.
Really? As of like a month or two ago?
2 years ago?
No. I ordered some from these guys like in the springtime.
Unless they redid it now.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it was discontinued.
Yeah, because when I looked online for it, yeah, it was, yeah, you want 50 or 100 pounds of it or whatever. I bought this bag of, I think it's 6 ounces, which I've given it away to people and stuff, and it's lasted me several years. Because, yeah.
Who did you buy it from?
This Natural company, right straight from them. Yes, GNATROL. And just Google that and it comes up, and I think it was $12 for that bag. And the key to it was not spraying it on there, but when you start the culture, you make the solution of it and soak the foam totally in the solution of that stuff. So I have a spray bottle that's always got that stuff on it to keep the culture wet. But then every time I start or redo one, and the way I redo it, because it gets crudted up pretty easy, like every couple months, I just take the foam, put it in the sink, squeeze it out underwater, and no matter how hard you squeeze it out and try and clean it, there will be worms still in there. So you just take it, put it back in the container, put a few of the pellets of food on there, and there will be the restart of the culture. It's
Where do you get the foam?
the foam is where did it?
Hobby Lobby?
The Jurgen found the foam.
Okay.
And I believe it was Bed Bath. I used to get it at Joanne Fabrics,
Okay.
but it's like seat cushion foam.
Okay.
But the version they have now is thinner and a more closed cell.
Okay.
So the best, he investigates stuff. So
Okay.
it's like the best version now he found, I believe, Bed Bath & Beyond, and it's the bumpers for a baby crib.
Okay.
And so he gets like a lifetime supply of it. But anything that's it comes about an inch and a half thick or so.
Okay.
And the worms can crawl through anything really. Some months, yes, David.
Hey, Mark, there's a company, there are 2 companies in the country, one happens to be in the Detroit area that manufactures that type of foam, whether you're talking, was it 30 or 40, openings per whatever the volume was. And I'm sort of surprised you didn't tap into that. And you get that without the herbicides or whatever.
Yeah.
Or
Well, the thing is, it lasts forever. I
Yeah.
mean, it's once you have it going, it gets a little
Because if
shredded a little bit, but it keeps going and going.
If you're looking though, you gotta be careful because a lot of it has the chemical in.
Yeah, they got fire retardant stuff
Fire
or
retardant.
whatever in there,
So
so.
you gotta look, be
Yeah.
careful what you're getting.
Yeah, and I did at one point a few months ago. I was going along squeezing it out, doing a new batch, and I didn't use the good treated water. I just, wrang it out, put it in the thing, and did. And sure enough, I'm going. A few weeks later, I've got gnats again. So they're always there, just waiting to attack your good stuff.
Hey, Mark, have you tried using the pillowcase for combating the gnats and the mites?
No. Yes, I have, and it didn't seem to work.
It didn't work.
It didn't work for me a few years ago. And just once we found this stuff, it's like, hey, very rarely do I have that. And surprisingly, I don't have a mite problem in there. I have a mite problem occasionally on the whiteworms.
Or the grindles.
Huh?
Or the grindles.
But not the
Grindles
grindles.
on dirt.
Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't, yeah, that's why we use the foam. It's like, but then one of the guys, Jim Bogdowski, kept saying, hey, you should use whiteworms. And he actually would tell me every 6 months I should use whiteworms, and I go, I never did it. So he's a carpenter. He actually built me this killer box with a Lexan cover on it and everything, just beautiful box, wooden box made out of whatever wood so it would breathe. And I tried it in my basement, and it worked in the wintertime. But as soon as it warmed up a bit, it kept getting fewer and fewer worms and everything. So back to Jurgen, because you need a wine cooler. White worms like 55 degrees. You set the wine cooler for 55 degrees. You get a little container like this with a mixture of dirt and peat moss and just yeast-soaked bread with, you have to cut the top off so that it fits inside so that the thing can breathe and evaporate a little bit. But every day you can go in and harvest a couple golf ball size things of white worms. And I have more than enough to feed all of the fish that will eat the white worms out of 2 of those containers when I do it. But they only get white worms a couple times a week because killifish, when you look at them, sometimes they're not too smart. They'll overeat and just kind of, I've killed a few with white worms. And also, have you ever noticed killifish aren't like the best fish in the world? They're not very athletic. They just kind of sit there.
They jump out pretty good.
They don't swim around like tetras or whatever. I mean, they're just sitting there on a leaf or on the bottom or whatever. And then literally that they will eat chunks. The white worms will eat the chunks of bread in a day with. And it's easy to overload the container with white worms. I mentioned before that all of the tanks have plants in them, and the plants are basically cryptocremes that, like 50 years ago, a friend of mine gave me 2 cryptocreme plants to put in my community tank. And it took over that tank, and I've taken over every tank I've owned since then. And I grow them, I just get a small bottom of a milk bottle, empty thing from carry-out Chinese food. But the best one are the little, probably 8-inch long containers that mushrooms come in at the grocery store. They're a nice chocolate brown color and are the perfect size for crypts in there. There's also, the tanks have cryptocremes, anubias, some of them have hornwort, and African ferns, which is my new favorite plant because I've got pieces of it in all of the fry tanks, and it can just kind of take over, depending on the light, it'll either grow out of the tank or just along the bottom, and it just makes a perfect, almost bottom cover for those tanks.
What was the name of that plant? African?
The African fern.
Oh, okay. Bovitis, I think.
Yeah, I have no clue what scientific is.
Mobitis.
Yeah, somewhere in here I've got a nice picture of it, but it will literally grow to the top of a 10-gallon tank, and it'll actually grow in the, seems like in the dark. I've got like fry tanks off in the corner of the room, not even near any lights, and just from the ambient light in the room, it doesn't grow very much, but it grows. So